Back to the headlines here. President Biden and congressional leaders confronted each other on the debt limit impasse yesterday, ending their meeting with no breakthrough, but agreeing to meet again this week to try to avert the looming risk of an unprecedented government default. Dr. Antonio Saravia is an associate professor of economics at Mercer University. He joins us now live to talk more about what the debt ceiling even is and help break it all down for us. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here.
My pleasure.
All right, so I do want to go back to basics here. Can you break down what this debt ceiling is? Because so many people have used the term and heard the term over the last several months. Break it down for us.
Yeah, so the debt limit or the debt ceiling is essentially the maximum amount of money that the federal government can borrow. Now, it's important that people understand that this is the maximum amount of money that the government can borrow to meet its existing obligations. So essentially, this is how much more debt you can engage in to pay already what you have spent on. That's the debt limit. We have it since 1917 when Congress created it via the Second Liberty Bond Act, and it's been in place ever since. Problem is that the national debt has increased under every presidential administration since Herbert Hoover. So at the moment we have piled in such a big amount of debt, we're at about 130% of GDP. And this is why we have these difficult negotiations every time we get to this point.
And that was going to be my next question here, is why is there so much trouble coming up with a bipartisan solution to this?
Right, so I think Republicans are seeing kind of the big problem, right? So it's like, we enjoy the tequila today, but the next generations are going to have the hangover. Essentially, our government spends too much money. That's what's going on. Our last fiscal surplus was in 2001. So we have more than 20 consecutive years of fiscal deficits. But not only we have fiscal deficits, but these fiscal deficits are getting larger and larger. Last year, 2022, our fiscal deficit was $1.38 trillion. So no matter how much taxes are raised, no matter how many new taxes you create, you're never going to be able to cover that gap. The problem here is spending. And so what Republicans are trying to do is say, okay, the U.S. is not going to default. The U.S. has never defaulted. But come on, let's agree on reducing that mandatory spending so we can start reducing these deficits and not have to have this problem again and again.
So the big question we get time and time again here, not just what is the debt ceiling, but also as the average American, how does this affect me? Why should the average American be paying attention to these ongoing talks?
So I would put it in two different ways, right? So we, the average American, should be worried because if the U.S. doesn't, or the government, the Congress doesn't reach an agreement on the debt ceiling and the U.S. default, that would be really bad. It would be really bad because it would mean that the government would stop paying its debt. And so you can imagine, right? So if there is a contractor building a highway or a public school or, facilities or whatever, those guys don't receive payment anymore. That means unemployment. That means that the stock market plummets. That means that interest rates go up. So if you have a credit card, your interest rate is going to go up. So that would be a really massive downturn. We will get into a very deep recession. And not only the U.S., but also the entire world. As you know, the U.S. concentrates a lot of the assets from the rest of the world. So it would be bad for that. But let me tell you this. The other way, which is let's solve our problem today, let's kick the can to the future, meaning let's just raise that debt limit and not worry about expenditure. At some point, we're going to have to make very drastic adjustments. So choose your poison, right? You want to face the problem now, or you want to keep kicking it down the road.
And I guess the next question then becomes, when would we start to feel the effects? As you mentioned, credit card payments and things of that nature could go up. But how soon would that happen?
All right, so let me start by saying, based on our previous experience, right, the debt ceiling has always been raised, right? It has been raised 74 times since 1962. We haven't failed once, right, to actually reach the debt limit. So if I'm based on that previous experience, I would say that's not going to happen. In fact, markets are already, don't already believe that the solution is going to be reached. If you look at the stock market, nothing has happened. There's no panic there because we expect that that's going to be lifted. If it doesn't, we don't know when the day is. Economists call that the X date, the day in which the U.S. will stop paying its debt. Some people say that that could come as early as June 1st. But again, in all likelihood, the debt limit is going to be lifted again.
My last question for you, what is the next step here? What happens next? Because it sounds like Biden and McCarthy are going to meet again later on this week. So where does this kind of go from here?
So again, if we revise our previous experiences with this, they are going to continue the negotiations. The Democrats are going to have to give in a little bit and promise to reduce some expenditures. The Republicans are going to kind of find a middle ground. And this could come down to the wire. Remember, we had episodes in which this could come to like minutes, hours only left before the debt limit will enter into effect. So maybe we're going to expect tense negotiations in the next days and hours, but eventually my guess is that it's going to be lifted like the 74 previous times.
Thank you so much for taking the time to join us and help break that down, because even I hear debt ceiling. I say it time and time again, but that was kind of a way to simplify it for the everyday folks, including myself there. All right, thank you so much for taking the time to be here. Is there anything else that you want to add about all of this before I let you go?
No, I guess the last word would be we need to be careful. We really need to be careful. We're spending too much money. Our debt is already at 130% of our GDP. It's time for us, for the U.S. government, for voters to think carefully about that and start reducing that expenditure. That's essentially, at the end of the day, the core problem we have. But thank you very much. Thank you for having me anytime.